Hester and the Physician, chapter 14, begins with Hester heading out to look for Roger Chillingworth, and she does find him. He is out picking herbs, and so she asks Pearl to run down to the water and play. And I just made a note here. There is some beautiful example of just figurative language. There's a simile here, a lot of imagery, sort of poetic writing. So the child flew away like a bird, and making bare her small white feet, went pattering along the moist margin of the sea. Like a little alliteration there. Here and there she came to a full stop and peeped curiously into a pool left by the retiring tide of a mirror for Pearl to see her face in. So there's a little description of here of how she sees her reflection. She pretends that reflection is a friend, which is sort of new. Remember, she didn't used to create a friend. She used to play with flowers and twigs. Now she's looking at her reflection and she's saying, come on, run with me. And she waves, sort of beckons to the reflection to run with her along the water. And she sees that reflection waving back at her. So she steps in mid-leg deep, looking at her own feet at the bottom of the sand and just smiling. And so as a mother, I'm thinking, oh my God, she's not going to drown, is she? She's going into the water and Hester's not with her. But nothing happens. She just plays appropriately by the water, which is good for Pearl, who often misbehaves. Meanwhile, Hester calls out to Roger Chillingworth asking if they could speak. And his response is eager. He says, oh, mistress, I hear good tidings of you on all hands. People are saying such good things about her. He tells her that people in town are even talking about letting her take the scarlet letter off, that she has done so many good things that she doesn't need to wear it anymore. And Hester says, were I worthy to quit of it, it would fall away of its own nature. Like if it truly didn't belong on me, it would just fall off. There's no way she's taking it off. She is devoted to the scarlet letter. And he kind of shrugs, well, if it suits you better, go right ahead and wear it. It shows right bravely on your bosom. So clearly, the scarlet letter has continued to take on new meaning. We talked about how it sort of represents her abilities. I would say it also represents her atonement. It also represents her bravery. So it has a lot of positive connotations now. Meanwhile, Hester is looking at Chillingworth and she is shocked by his appearance. And this whole paragraph is describing how he has aged pretty well. He has this vigor and alertness, which is coming from his, vengeance against Dimmesdale. But she remembers that he used to be studious, calm, and quiet, and that behavior is no longer part of his sort of day-to-day life. He seems, scheming is probably a good word. And he seems like there's evil in him. And so she's recognizing this. In fact, the next paragraph says, actually, Roger Chillingworth was a striking evidence of man's faculty of transforming himself into a devil. He has been devoting himself for 7 years to the constant analysis of a heart of torture and deriving his enjoyment from that. So it has given him an eagerness and an energy, but it's all for evil. The scarlet letter burned on Hester's bosom, and she thinks to herself, here is another man who is ruined by her sin. And Chillingworth says, what do you see in my face that you look at it so earnestly? So he notices how she's looking at him. And she says, something that would make me weep. And then she sort of changes the subject. She says, but let it pass. It is of yonder miserable man that I would speak. So she's talking about Dimmesdale. Chillingworth is very excited to talk about Dimmesdale, eagerly, as if he loved the topic. Hester says, 7 years ago, you made me promise not to say that we were married. So she's reminding him that she promised to keep their relationship a secret. But she says that she doesn't feel like she can do that anymore in good conscience. She says, there remained a duty towards him, and something whispered me that I was betraying it in pledging myself to keep your counsel. She's talking about Dimmesdale. Because she, has a child by him, she feels a duty to him, as she should. And she feels like keeping the secret about who Chillingworth is somehow betraying Dimmesdale, that Dimmesdale ought to know. And she justifies this by saying, you burrow and rankle in his heart. You're with him every minute, and he doesn't know who you are. In permitting this, I have surely acted a false part by the only man to whom the power was left me to be true. So, I could actually do good things for Dimmesdale, and by not telling him who you are, I'm hurting him even more than he's already hurting. Chillingworth says, well, what choice do you have? If it wasn't for me, he justifies in this next paragraph, Dimmesdale would already be dead. He's like, the fact that he breathes and creeps about on the earth is because of me, because I've been giving him medical attention, helping him as best he can. And Hester's prince says, well, better that he had died. And Chillingworth says, it's true. It is better that he would have died. Better had he died at once. But then he admits, Chillingworth does, that Dimmesdale has been conscious of him. He says he has felt an influence dwelling always upon him like a curse. He knew by some spiritual sense, for the Creator never made another being so sensitive as this. He knew that no friendly hand was pulling at his heartstrings, and that an eye was looking curiously at him, which sought only evil and found it. So he senses, we know this too from earlier, Dimmesdale senses there's something dangerous in Chillingworth. And it's because he is such a sensitive, perceptive man that he's able to figure that out. And as he explains all this to Hester, he suddenly lifts his hands in horror, because he has recognized as he talks how evil he has become. It says, it was one of those moments which sometimes occur only at interval of years, when a man's moral aspect is faithfully revealed to his mind's eye. He recognizes how awful he's been. And Hester's like, haven't you tortured him enough? Hasn't he paid the debt? And interestingly, Chillingworth says, no, the debt has increased. And what he explains is that in the time he has spent with Dimmesdale, as he has become more and more evil, he realizes how much of his life he has lost. He says, but all my life has been made up of earnest, studious, thoughtful, quiet years, bestowed faithfully for the increase of mine own knowledge, and faithfully too, though this latter object was but casual to the other, faithfully for the advancement of human welfare. His whole life prior to coming to the Massachusetts Bay Colony was studying, learning to try to be intellectual and to be advanced and to use that knowledge for good. No life had been more peaceful and innocent than mine. Few lives so rich with benefits conferred. Dost thou remember me? Was I not, though you might deem me cold, nevertheless a man thoughtful for others, craving little for himself, kind, true, just, and constant, if not warm affections? Was I not all this? And Hester admits, yes, and more. So he was a good man prior to Hester's betrayal. He doesn't deserve this. And so the more time he spends with Dimmesdale, the more he feels betrayed. So that's why this debt continues to increase. He's in this vicious downward cycle of constant revenge. I have already told thee I am a fiend. Who made me so? And Hester cries, shuddering, it was myself. It was I, not less than he. Why hast thou not avenged thyself on me? He's like, it wasn't just him. It was me. It's me. I mean, it's actually her more, because Dimmesdale was never married. Hester was married. And so she betrayed a vow to her husband, and he's not bothering her at all. And she asks him why. And he says, well, the Scarlet letter is enough, which interestingly, has only been good for her. If that has not avenged me, I can do no more. He lays a finger on it with a smile. It has avenged thee, answered Hester Prynne. I judge no less, said the physician. And now, what wouldst thou with me touching this man? So he's like, what do you want from me regarding Dimmesdale? And so she lays it out directly. She says, I must reveal the secret. He must know who you are. Because she says, you've been with him all this time. And, he deserves to know the truth. She says, do with him what you want. There is no good for him, no good for me, no good for thee. There is no good for little Pearl. There is no path to guide us out of this dismal maze. So she's like, I'm not going to tell you to stop being mean to him, but I must tell him who you are. And so Chillingworth's response is to say, I could well pity thee. Thou hast great elements, peradventure, hast thou met earlier with a better love than mine, this evil had not been. I pity thee for the good that has been wasted in thy nature. So he compliments her. It's like, you're fundamentally a good person. The fact that she cares so much for his well-being and doesn't want Dimmesdale to be, lied to is another example of her goodness. And he's like, I feel so bad for you because you are fundamentally good and you've been ruined by your sin. But of course, I would say that goodness is still there within her. And because she's atoning for her sin, she can act on it, which is what she's doing here. And Hester says, and I pity you for the hatred that has transformed a wise and just man into a fiend. Wilt thou yet purge it out of thee and be once more human? She's saying, I starred this. This is important. He could turn his back on sin. He's the victim here. He could remember he was a good person. He could turn his back on being evil and return to his fundamental self, is what she's saying. She's like, there might be good for thee and thee alone, because he didn't do anything wrong. She did something wrong. Dimmesdale did something wrong. He didn't. I put good argument. This is very wise. Since thou hast been deeply wronged, a victim, and has it at thy will to pardon, like you could pardon, you could move on from this, wilt thou reject that priceless benefit? How would you turn your back on the opportunity to be a good person again? And he just disregards her. Peace, peace, he says to her. It is our fate. He feels like it's too far. He's too far in it. He's too far consumed. It defines every aspect of his life. Let the black flower blossom as it may. Now go thy ways and deal as thou wilt with yonder man. So he gives her the permission, basically, to tell Dimmesdale who he is. He's like, do whatever you want. We're going to let this play out as nature intends it. He waves his hand, and then he goes back to gathering herbs.